Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to bring you part 2 of my Imperium vs. Terrans matchup. That's the Imperium of Man from Warhammer 40k against the Terrans from Starcraft. This section will be going over the speed capabilities of each side. Also, if you want to support the channel, there's a coffee link in the description. Alright, speed. There's several ways that we can talk about speed in both universes. For the purposes of this comparison, I'll be talking about ground speed, in-atmosphere speed, space speed, and faster-than-light travel. I'll start with the Imperium. On the ground, there's a variety of units from the humble Imperial Guardsman, who's about as fast as any person with 2 legs, to Space Marines and their power armor, who can sprint between 30 and 50 miles per hour and even carry jump jets to augment their mobility further. They also have various vehicles, including wheeled, tracked, and legged types, none of which have extraordinarily fast mobility capabilities. Most things are pretty benign overall, with the Space Marines being somewhat faster than normal people, but not to an absurd degree. One thing that they do have that helps their tactical mobility is drop pods. Given an orbital presence, Space Marines can drop from orbit anywhere onto a planet's surface. These pods can be shot down en route, but doing so seems to be relatively difficult to accomplish. Space Marines in particular also sometimes have a degree of teleportation ability. This is of limited range, only from distances like from orbit to the surface of a planet, not from a planet to another planet, something like that. They can also teleport locally from one surface of a planet to another surface on that same planet. Very, very useful, but also very uncommon means of transportation. In the air, the Imperium utilizes a variety of aircraft, though their exact capabilities are unclear. Based on their designs, though, I'm going to make the judgment call that none are generally capable of supersonic flight, since their geometry simply doesn't support that kind of movement. In space, again, the Imperium uses a variety of classes of ships from tiny fighters to gigantic battleships, none of which display extraordinary speed capabilities, and again, which really don't have sublight speed capabilities spelled out all that well. Where things get interesting is their faster-than-light travel. In terms of how many times the speed of light the Imperium ships can move, that's totally unexplained, and I won't get too bogged down trying to figure it out. Suffice to say, the Imperium can deploy ships pretty much anywhere in the galaxy in a matter of weeks or months, depending on distance or how complicated the route happens to be. Where things get really interesting is exploring exactly how their faster-than-light travel works. They use warp travel. But this isn't your nice, Star Trek warp travel where you're kind of distorting space-time to kind of cheat the laws of physics because, you can't move faster than light, but space can move as fast as it wants, so you just kind of move space. You contract the space in front of you while extending it behind you. That's basically how warp drive works, at least in Star Trek. No, this is dimension-hopping warp travel, where instead of distorting space-time, you create a portal to the warp, which is basically hell. Yeah, demons and all, and then navigate that for a while before opening another portal and returning to real space. Yeah, nothing's ever nice in Warhammer. I'll link a video in the description explaining more about how warp travel actually works, but the main takeaways are that in order to travel the warp safely, Imperium ships need powerful psychics, on board who can basically project a bubble of reality around their ships to keep it safe. They also have to keep several psychers around because if any of them get too distracted or injured or whatever, then that bubble slips a little bit. And if it fails or even cracks a little bit, then the chaos of the warp spills into the whole ship and it'll quickly become overrun by chaos demons while everybody on board is driven crazy. Yeah, also, time and space don't really behave according to normal rules while in the warp, so a trip that really only took a week, at least in real space, might actually kind of take for the crew a month or a year, something like that. It's weird. It's super badly defined, but that's partially because the warp is supposed to be super chaotic where the normal rules don't apply, so it rejects the limitations imposed by, physics. But hey, it still beats traveling at sublight speeds. Alright, moving on to the Terrans. Again, starting with the ground forces, Terrans don't field any units that aren't in some kind of power armor or suit or vehicle. The Terran Marines are the standard Garden variety units of the Terrans, and they have a movement speed of 4, which can be boosted to 6 using Stimpaks. Yay for game info! Alright, so what do movement 4 and 6 translate to? Well, it's hard to say based on their behavior in game, because everything is gamified and the scaling is awful. I think it's reasonable to say, though, based on what we get to see in cinematics and everything else, that their normal movement is the equivalent of a brisk walk or jogging pace, while their Stimpack boosted speed is closer to a fast sprint, so I'll put their maximum speed at about 30 miles an hour and normal speed more like 20. As for vehicles, again the Terrans utilize a variety, but just like the Imperium, none are extraordinarily fast, and also like the Imperium, they utilize drop pods and teleporters, but in a much more limited manner. Whereas the Imperium can drop whole armored vehicles in a pod in addition to Marines or whatever, the Terrans are limited to Marines or Ghosts. And whereas Imperium teleportation can essentially be free targeted if the requisite psychers are available, the Terran teleporters are relatively primitive and are really just site-to-site teleporters between teleportation pads, typically located within either facilities or ships. And the air is a bit weird for the Terrans. Based on gameplay, nothing is extraordinarily fast, but at the same time, they're also utilizing full-on space battle cruisers, which are either the size of cities or about 20 dudes, depending on if you're going by cinematics or gameplay. Yeah, the scaling is awful, and it's hard to base anything on it. Based on the designs of the Terran air units, though, I'm going to again make the judgment call that only the battle cruisers are actually spaceships, and the rest, with the possible exception of the Raven reconnaissance ships, are either exclusively aircraft or can operate in atmosphere or in space, the exception being the Banshee, which utilizes propellers and thus cannot operate in space. Again, based on their geometry and unit descriptions, I don't think any of the smaller Terran flyers are capable of going supersonic. The only one that's really set up to be able to go supersonic is the Viking, and it can transform into this bulky walker, so it's pretty clunky in that way. And it's notably slower than the even more clunky Liberator, so yeah, no supersonic flight on either side. In space, we once again have zero information about how fast any ships can actually go, so I'm just going to assume that neither side has a mobility advantage in space, aside from smaller ships are more nimble. Finally, Terran, faster than light travel. Terrans also utilize warp travel, but theirs is much closer to Star Trek kind of warp travel, at least in terms of how friendly it is. How fast this travel is varies wildly, with the earliest lore-based uses having the initial colony ships traveling to the Koprulu sector, 60,000 light-years away from Earth over the course of 30 years. But then later generations of warp engines were able to make the same trip in a much shorter time span, more like months. The major advantage of Terran warp travel is that theirs doesn't require traveling through hell, so there's basically no risk of demons or insanity killing off your entire crew while in transit. As for which side is ultimately faster, I think this one's pretty much a wash. Both sides are as fast or slow as the riders need them to be, though if I had to pick one, I'd say that Terran faster than light travel is a bit faster, in addition to the fact that you're pretty much guaranteed that whatever ship you're using will actually arrive at its destination, which is not a given with the Imperium, but I don't think it's that much faster if it is. Alright, speed section down. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything super important on either side, or if I'm downplaying or exaggerating something I shouldn't. There's a ton of information to be had, so I won't be super surprised if I did, and I don't mind being corrected, so yeah, go for it. Again, there's a coffee link in the description if you want to support the channel, and until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.